Greetings once again. It's a pleasure to be back. And today, as per the title, I'm going to talk about why the African pharmaceutical industry needs anchoring. And when you talk about anchoring, we're looking at it from the dimension that we need a solid organization, institutionalized framework that is ensuring that we have a common go-to place in terms of interventions, initiatives, and discussions that we're looking at in terms of growing the African pharmaceutical industry. Because as much as we've been doing a lot in the continent over time, without having a common domicile location where we know this is where we go to when we're looking at solutions, this is where we go to when we're looking at how do we collaboratively work together to champion for the growth of the industry. And there are certain developments in the industry, certain shortfalls that we've noted that I feel need to be addressed. And for them to be addressed, then we need to start from somewhere. Generally, even in the African, the human social framework is that you have a home where you go to every day. You need a place where you go back, reflect, and start off again. Why not in the Africa pharmaceutical industry? Why don't we have a common home, a common house where we can say, this is how we are going to shape the future? And it is a future that is not only for individuals, but also for the African continent at large. And that is what we need to hope for. So at the current moment, when you look at the place of the Africa pharmaceutical industry, it's about understanding why do we need a growing and robust Africa pharmaceutical industry. We all know that there's no healthcare in terms of healthcare service delivery that does not involve the use of medicines. And if that is the case, then we need to ask ourselves, do we have the quality medicines in our continent? That is the first thing. So once we know that we have medicines in the continent, are they effective? Are they quality? Are they efficacious? And that is a bit where we talk about aspect of counterfeit, substandard, and falsified medicines, which are infiltrating our markets. And once we know that we have our medicines from the pharma industry, then the next bit for us is to ask ourselves, are the medicines being made available where they are needed by the relevant healthcare service providers? And that is where we now look at it from the supply chain component, the distribution models that are available in the African pharmaceutical industry. And beyond that, then after looking at the distribution, they're being made available in the communities, do we have qualified professionals who are able to actually diagnose the patients, work on prescribe the medications, dispense them, and actually offer medication therapy monitoring, medicines follow-up to the patients to ensure the patients are deriving optimal value out of the medicines that are being made available to them. That is another bit. Then after that, do we have an enlightened and educated patient population, an African population that is cognizant of the shortfalls that we have in the pharmaceutical industry in terms of quality issues? How do they identify, let's say, for example, a medicine is fake? That is on one bit. How do they know how to use their medicines? Are they compliant in terms of understanding the cost of not complying to their medication, adherence issues? So that is the health education component, the pharmaceutical aspect of education. So when we look at the place of Africa pharmaceutical industry, we know the pharma industry has a substantial role. And that substantial role starts from the research and development of new medicines to the ultimate end where they're being used and actually patients are getting positive health outcomes from the use of these medicines. That is the whole space. And we need to ask ourselves, how do we make this clear, concise aspiration of the industry a reality? And in making it a reality, we have to start from understanding where are we now? And once we know where we are, we need to ask ourselves, what would be the next steps in terms of going to that next phase and realizing these aspirations? And finally, what are the prospects in the industry? So in the current state, one of the key things that we noted is that there's a segregation in the Africa pharmaceutical landscape. That is in the sense that every pharmaceutical manufacturer is working at an individual level because everybody is looking at conquering the largest market share on an individual basis, which would work in terms of manufacturing. But at the same time, if we establish frameworks where we could have integrated collaborative ecosystem functions, where let's say, for example, if I have a company that is producing active pharmaceutical ingredients, APIs, then another person doesn't have to invest in APIs because at the end of the day, we're doing almost the same thing. If I can produce the APIs for them, they'll be manufacturing the actual finished product. Another person will be now doing the distribution on that chain. And we have an enabling environment rather than a competitive, yes, but a skewed market in the sense that we have an area where not everyone is able to meet the demands of the market. And therefore, there's some areas that will be overlooked, they will be neglected. And when these are neglected, ultimately the end person who suffers is the patient who needs that medication who can't have it. So because of these segregations, and not only in the manufacturing sector, Even when you talk about it from the manufacturer level to the distributors, to the end retailers, do we have a common framework where we see how are we working together? Do we collaborate? From the academia end, the people who are doing academia in training on people who are coming into the industry, do they understand the challenges, the gaps that are being met in the market? If they don't understand them, then there's a minimal chance that we are going to have an enabled and actually a competent workforce coming into the industry in the next phase. If we don't have a competent workforce coming into the industry, that is going to be a loss for us. So we need this segregation where we have the different facets, the different players, the different segments of the industry coming together and actually realizing these are the things that we need, these are the capabilities that we have, how do we make the best of it? And once we come together and find a way that we can collaboratively address challenges and shortfalls in the industry, we are on a mission. And that mission is to realize our aspiration of having a robust, effective, and reliable Africa pharmaceutical industry. The other bit that we need to look at in terms of the current status is that we have piecemeal interventions. In 2012, actually starting 2009 to 2012, we had the initial discussions on African medicines regulatory harmonization. And there has been an ongoing conversation around harmonizing regulations in the region and all that, which was good. But as much as it started in the 2009, moving forward into 2012, after which now from 2012, we had the regional economic communities coming up with their own medicines regulatory harmonization framework. We have the EAC, we have the IGAD one, we have the West African, South Africans, where we have the Zazibona one. So all these different initiatives have been coming up. But the question is, where are they domiciled? Where are we driving this conversation? That is from regulatory harmonization. They would be starting years, but if they start, some of them have shortfalls. The sustainability frameworks are not properly put in place, and therefore there would be chances that most of them will fail. The other one that we're talking about, African Medicine Supplies Platform, that was established during the COVID pandemic in 2020. When that started, then it was being led by the UN envoy, the AU envoy, Strive Masiu, and some of the conversations that were happening at that time is that the developed countries, the high-income earners, were able to procure essential supplies in responding to COVID-19. The diagnostics, they were able to get them. The ventilators that were needed, the medicines, vaccines when came available, those are some of the things that we are looking at. Are we able to get the supplies we need for the industry in a timely manner? And if we are able to get them, are we able to make them accessible to our people? So therefore, that was going to be kind of a commercial platform from which the African member countries would be able to consolidate their funding and buy products in bulk and use that platform in getting these. I started over COVID period. As of now, there's no much in terms of progress in that end. And chances are, this might be another investment that is going to die in our face as we see it. The other bit is now African Medicines Agency. This has been a conversation, and actually the major bit is in terms of consolidating the regulatory framework, which is drawing from the African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization. And there's a conversation that is going on it. And currently we are hoping we'll get one of the African member countries to host this particular agency, which will be good for us. But that agency, what are the prospects for it? And that is a good thing that we need to be looking at into the future. In 2012, we have the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan for Africa. And that is based on the fact that when we looked at the local dynamics in terms of infectious diseases, super high. We have a growing burden of non-communicable diseases. And as much as these are happening, the epidemiological patterns will influence what products are being manufactured in which region, who is distributing them into those countries and all that. And on that account, then it means being Africa is more exposed to the infectious diseases that might be reducing in other continents, there would be a higher burden. But then also our financial capability in terms of procuring such medicines would be low. And therefore, what is the incentive for other manufacturers? But within an African context, we understand the economic value of investing in these. And therefore, for that, we need to have our local pharmaceutical manufacturing industry that is able to meet our local needs. But at the same time, the economic imperative that we're looking at, a continental framework where we can serve our local needs. We can drive economic growth and economic development of the industry from that perspective. Then the Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Plan was rolled out by the AU NEPAD. And at the same time, that has been an OUDA NEPAD, that is. There's been an ongoing conversation on, are we going to realize the aspirations of the PMPA? Are we able to implement it? Who is implementing it? Where do we have the caucus where we bring ideas, bring people together to talk about how to grow the industry? And those are still conversations that need to be had. But then recently, actually last week, there was an honor when the African Development Bank rolled out, actually endorsed, the board endorsed the establishment, the African Pharmaceutical Technology Foundation. And it is to be hosted in Rwanda. as we talk about these majorly to ensure that we have research and development, innovative medical supplies and pharmaceutical technologies can be developed within the African continent to be able to produce innovative life-saving medicines for the African people. And that is a good thing because we now see there is that momentum that is coming up. All these interventions have been coming up in different areas. And when we talk about as the current state is that these are piecemeal because each is starting on its own accord. But as much as they're starting on their own different fragments, there's no actually coalescing factor that is bringing all of them together to see we have a common African pharmaceutical industry. If you're going to do research and development, let's say, for example, the H3D Institute in South Africa, they're doing research and development. They'll need a manufacturing plant to be able to do large-scale production. But after that, there's need for a distribution model that is working across the continent. Do we have distributors coming on board? We have associations that are coming up in that space as well. So how do we integrate them? Then the African countries need to buy medicines, and pool procurement is being floated as the future because in terms of pool procurement, economies of scale are going to be favorable for us. Are we able to get medicines affordably? And that is what we need to look at in terms of efficient and economical use, prudent use of our resources. So when we have all these interventions coming up in piecemeal, the question is, are we not wasting more resources in the process? And would it have been better because if we consolidate them, we have prudent use of resources, yes, on one end, but at the same time, we have a structured, integrated framework where we are able to realize the aspirations. And those are key things that we need to look at. And then one of the key things that we are grateful for is the fact that development partners' support and commitment has been there over time. All along, when you talk about African Medicines Regulatory Harmonization, medical supplies platform, PMPA, and all that, most of these have been supported by development partners like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, the AU, the WHO. Every other organization is coming on board in some way or the other to support these initiatives. The USAID has always been there, Management Sciences for Health, MSH. So all these institutions are coming to support the African pharmaceutical industry development. But as much as they're coming on particular agendas, particular initiatives. And it's therefore our own responsibility to ask ourselves, how do we leverage on this support and commitment from these development partners? How do we integrate all these different platforms and initiatives that are coming up to ensure that at the end of the day, we have a working and a functioning African pharmaceutical industry? And on that case, then my actually argument is the fact that first thing we need to get leadership. And that leadership should be anchored on the fact that actually the 4 I's of leadership, transformational leadership is what we need for the African pharmaceutical industry. That is where we'll be looking at idealized influence. Are we going to go by the ideals of what we aspire for? Because our aspirations are idealistic. And that is the only thing that once we commit to it, we might not realize the ideals, but we are getting closer to addressing most of the pressing challenges we have. Then inspirational motivation, we have these leaders who are going to shape the future of our industry, future of our continent. Are they committed to that aspiration? And if we're able to get that, that would be a win for us. Individualized consideration, it would be at an individual level, at personal, but at the same time, African countries, we have 55 countries. All of them have different capabilities, different needs, and different potential in terms of what they can achieve and what they can offer in this kind of journey. The question is, which of these countries can give us the initial impetus that we need to drive this momentum? Once we have that individualized consideration, we'll be on a better place. Then we now need to look at it from in terms of intellectual stimulation. Are we thinking, are we opening our minds? And that is where one of the key things that we're looking at in terms of, do we have the academia being part of it? Because we need new knowledge. And this new knowledge can be from the scientific realm, but also it has to be on the operational level and the corporate work, where we need to see, are we integrating just science and the business component? And are we creating an ecosystem that is dynamic and moving? The cogs of the wheel have to move together. And that is where we need to go focusing. So then the other bit is in terms of sustained investment, engagement, and collaboration. All these that we're saying needs to be invested in. Who is going to invest? And it can't be invested in unless we have a common general anchor point where we know this is where we are going. So once we have that proper leadership that is envisioning that future, bringing people together, then we anchor them and have a domicile ecosystem where we see this is what we're doing to champion for the next future. And I remember this in terms of anchoring, actually, there's an article that I wrote a while back, and this article was about why we need a Stanford-like university in Africa. And what I was looking at it from the Stanford component is that within the institution started from a training campus, but at the same time, it brought industries, talent pool, and people are now getting into the innovative ecosystem. Therefore, there is room to do more. And that room to do more is what we need for the African ecosystem. And I believe that is what we need to anchor. Then we sustain the investment, collaboratively engage over time. Then through these engagements, we're getting new ideas, getting new solutions. And these solutions are being implemented because there's the financial investment to it. Then with that, we are going to shape the future of our country. And then on that account, as I conclude on this, what are the prospects that we have now? In 2020, with a couple of colleagues across the continent, we had Africa Pharmaceutical Network coming into place. And one of the key things that we ask ourselves as Africa Pharma Network, co-visionaries, co-curators, is the fact that for us to succeed in championing transformation of the Africa pharmaceutical industry, we need a common network that brings us together. And that common network would have in terms of us sharing knowledge about insights and developments in all the other regions in the continent. And other than that knowledge sharing, then the next phase is to shape policies, because we know policies govern everything and all that we do in the industry. So that policy aspect would be critical for us. Then finally, we need to stimulate innovation. Innovative ideas, business principles, business models that are going to help us actually realize the aspirations, because everything is business, but at the same time, as much as it's a business, it needs to be founded from a point of knowledge, policies that are enabling for it, and then we spark that innovation to ensure we grow the industry. And that was what our initial idea as Africa Pharmaceutical Network. As we're moving forward, we note that we have professionals who are willing to come on board. We have local manufacturers who have needs and who have interest in other markets that might not have idea to. Distributors are in the space, financials, policymakers, and last mile delivery partners who are actually ensuring the medicines get to the people who need them. And this is what we are hoping, that Africa Pharmaceutical Network would be the anchor, playing the intermediary role in terms of bringing together the Africa pharmaceutical industry players from manufacturer R&D to the ultimate end patient, because we need to design products and solutions and having in mind the needs of the population that we are serving. And if you're able to do that, then I believe the anchoring of the Africa pharmaceutical industry will be the solution to helping us overcome the hurdles and the barriers that we are facing, and ensure that our African populace has access to the quality, safe, and effective medicine that they need without suffering undue problems in terms of affordability, the reliability, the convenience of having these medicines, and without being dependent on other stakeholders and other players. In the same case as we're talking about the Africa Pharmaceutical Technology Foundation, where some of the key things that were considered during the endorsement is the fact that we are at a point where we have to wait for others to develop innovative solutions for us to take advantage of them. And even after they've been developed, accessing them becomes a challenge because we don't have the financial muscle, financial capacity to procure and actually to competitively procure. And these are challenges that we're facing. How do we overcome these? I believe as a continent, we have the solutions, and it's about us committing and us doing the work that needs to be done to get us to the next level. And if you're able to do it, we'll be more than glad to contribute to that journey. As Africa Pharma Network, we're willing and committed to doing this, and I believe the future is bright for us. Thank you so much. As we're moving forward, those who would be interested to engage with us more, feel free to reach out on email, feel free to have conversations. Let's work together, let's collaborate, let's share ideas by just having a common platform where we share knowledge and share best practices. If you enjoy these, please subscribe, like the video, and comment. Feel free to share their networks. Thank you so much.